Welcome over to Automotive World, everyone. I'm your host, Vinny Mystery. Tonight, we have a top story. Yesterday, we talked about Fisker Group filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Today, I want to go over the voluntary issue recall that they issued about a week ago, but we're also going to go in a little bit more into that Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and we're actually going to do a deep dive. The reason I'm doing it this way is obviously because the recall was posted a little while ago. We were covering other automotive news. However, I think also this is a really good perspective, as we did cover yesterday and see what they are trying to do with Chapter 11. This is a really interesting way, so we'll see how does this affect this recall, and just a little bit more insight as to what's going on with Fisker. Like I said yesterday, we all saw this coming, despite Fisker getting additional capital from investors, raising about close to $3.5 million. We all saw this coming. So let's really, we'll go into this press release as well, but let's actually go into a deep dive on not only the recall that's here, but just a deep dive with Fisker in general and what's going on in general. And so let's get right into that. Obviously, we know yesterday Fisker filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. We covered that. If you guys want to see that, we will cover and talk about that obviously a little bit today. But if you guys want to see the bulk of that press release, go onto the channel. It's our latest upload. It's right there. You can check out that video. However, on June 12th, so this was about a little bit more than a week ago, Fisker issued a voluntary recall to address software issues via over-the-air updates for North American and European market vehicles. So this was essentially, we can call a global update, which makes sense because the vehicles that are over in Europe and the ones they have in North America are pretty much identically the same. There's obviously very, very, very little minute changes, but they're identically the same. Now, Fisker, obviously, they talk about here in their mission to become the world's most emotional and sustainable electric vehicles. They did announce today, though, 2 voluntary recalls for the North American and European vehicles for software-related issues. And we have here, Fisker is issuing a voluntary safety recall. This is for a total of 11,201 Fisker Ocean vehicles, their SUVs, across the United States, Canada, and Europe. As of right now, those vehicles with current motor control unit and the vehicle control unit software may cause the vehicle to enter a safe state protection mode, potentially leading to a loss of power to the motor, and all of those vehicles affected will receive over-the-air updates, and that's going to be a part of version 2.1 of the Fisker Ocean OS software. So in terms of that, it's not, obviously it's a serious recall because number one, you don't want to just be driving and have a vehicle go into limp home mode and you lose all your power. So it is a big recall. It is a serious recall. Fisker is also issuing another voluntary non-compliance recall for 6,864 Fisker Oceans in the United States and 281 in Canada. So for whatever reason, Canada has a very, very small number of them. And those vehicles right now, what is happening, they currently do not comply with certain federal motor vehicle safety standards, which that is a really, really big issue. And that's regarding gauges and telltale icons in the cluster display. And all of those vehicles as well will receive version OS 2.1 of Fisker's software. And this is just kind of, before even getting into the dates here, obviously we see down here the software update process, will start by June 30th. And then May 30th, they will also be notifying as well in those times for recalls. But this is just kind of how we talked about it yesterday. And a lot of reviewers, myself, a lot of consumers, myself, have been posting this. And Fisker talked about it yesterday in their press release for Chapter 11. They talked about it, right here. They brought the Ocean to the market twice as fast. And I mentioned that yesterday. Bringing something twice as fast isn't always twice as good. And when you see that we have voluntary recalls are always a good thing in a way because it means that, the manufacturer initiated it, not NHTSA or any other agencies. But when you have, a recall like, this recall up here, the first one, the limp home mode recall, that's a big thing. But then when you have something like this, that's, not complying with federal motor vehicle safety standards for gauges and icons within the cluster display. If that doesn't tell you that, you rush the vehicle. Like, there's no reason like that should have to come in a software update. I understand, yes, with an over-the-air update, the great thing about that is that you can always add that later on. But it's like something like that. Like, when you buy a car, you shouldn't have to worry about, oh, I have to, there's going to be a recall for my gauge clusters because there's something missing. That's just, when you see this recall and then you see the Chapter 11, it's just, this is just not a good look for Fisker. And like I said, Fisker they were honestly, when you look at them, before you even look at the reviewers and the people who attempted to buy one and they couldn't even get one, Fisker this was already going to fail. Fisker has tried this before with the Karma. It was a cool car, but it was ultimately a failure. We talked about this yesterday from a sales aspect, from a dealer network aspect, from a service department aspect. Communications between dealer network, sales, and corporate was not there. And also just, a quality aspect. The quality really wasn't necessarily there. The reliability was not necessarily there. And for a multitude of reasons, it just wasn't comparable to other vehicles in the class for that price. There was a lot of reliability and safety issues, and they talk about it there. Advertising that we were able to bring the car twice as fast compared to the rest of the market. When you look back at it, that is not a good sign. It is not a good sign. And so ultimately, this came out a week before, but we all knew that this was going to happen. But we do want it to go in. I did want to go in and do a deep dive on this, just because this is important. And I think obviously with their previous press release, like I said, of them getting to the market twice as fast, this just sort of amplifies, especially with all the recalls we've seen, just very, very basic, not even, mechanical things that have gone wrong, serious things, but very basic issues that, honestly, in my opinion, should never even need a recall. It genuinely should not need that. And I do want to go over a little bit about Chapter 11 as well. Obviously, Fisker doesn't want to go out without a fight, right? And we've seen this. This isn't the first time they've done this. So, filing for Chapter 11, what that essentially means is that they can continue operations, and we have the definition here. So, under Chapter 11, debt corporations they're going to essentially try to recapitalize and try to emerge from the bankruptcy with more equity and less debt. So, a lot of what Chapter 11 is obviously not necessarily selling everything and completely going out of business, but debt corporations and things like that, they want you to essentially restructure your debt. That way you can pay, a lot of times usually for a longer period, but it would be a shorter payment. That way, essentially your payments can be less, which then, if you are making money, allows you to, even if it takes longer, essentially the idea is that with a lower payment, you can still make money, make some profit. So at some point, you will come out on top, so that way you have more equity, so you don't necessarily have to sell everything at once. However, we do know with Fisker, yes, they did say they would be getting rid of assets. And this is, it's big for a lot of reasons, because it's not, this is not going to necessarily clear debt at all, but this does give Fisker the chance to try to pay off everything that they can with giving the least amount of assets and equity away. Now, obviously, in things like Chapter 7, you would have to, give away more assets and more, just more liquidity. You wouldn't have as much of a company. So Chapter 11 is, as Fisker talked about it yesterday, it is the most sustainable way for them, but really, there isn't really any necessarily sustainable way here. And, we do talk about it here as well, that they say it's the most sustainable, the most viable path for them. They have determined with the sale of their assets under Chapter 11 that is the most, viable. So obviously they don't want to sell as many assets as they can. Obviously they would love to keep all of their assets, from technology to just design, even patents and things like that. And obviously naming for things as well. Obviously to trademark vehicles and things like that, you have to pay for those names. So obviously Fisker would love to keep all of that in-house, as if they were to sell that off and try to rebuy it in the future, they would, it would cost them a lot more money. So obviously Fisker is doing Chapter 11. That way they are able to hold on to everything that they possibly can. But in the case of Fisker, we see them, we know what's going on. They talk about it here as well. They do know that they need to reduce those operations. So in terms of the recall, because this is an over-the-air update, there's no actual labor needed to take the vehicle into a service center or anything to do the recall. However, with reduced operations, that's going to reduce operations from every department. So dealer networks, there's going to be less. There's going to be less salespeople. There's going to be less service people, even at corporate as well, for people who are going to be, pushing out the software updates and things like that. By reducing the operations, you're reducing the amount of people. So the quality of those updates may deteriorate. The time to which they may be pushed out may even deteriorate. So there's a lot of things that go on with that. And obviously, they talk about it here, which this is with all companies. You do need to include, in that cost, though, you do need to pay your employees their wages. You do need to pay them benefits, as if you don't, you obviously can get into legal action for that, and that would be even more detrimental on top of what's already going on. And if that were to happen, that would probably be truly the end of Fisker. Like I said, we have seen this with Fisker and the Karma and other vehicles they've tried to do. But if something like that was to happen, and we could honestly even argue right now, this is probably going to be the end of Fisker forever. But if something like that were to happen, that would truly, truly be the end of Fisker, because all those investors that they just recently got money from, that would show that, okay, this company has tried multiple times. There is no clear path. The leadership is not there. This is a company that is all out of order. Obviously, too, as well, Fisker, with all car companies, whether it's part suppliers, whether it's advertising things, they have vendors that they still, even though despite the position they're in, they have legal contracts that they do have to meet. We talked about that as well yesterday. And so this is a tough spot. This is a really, really tough spot. And like I said, right now, this is for the division of the North American market, the United States market for Fisker that is filed for Chapter 11. The subsidiaries outside of the United States, so being in the European market and globally, have not filed. But keep in mind, under that subsidiary, under the one company, we clearly can see that, okay, Fisker is struggling with sales, they're struggling with service, they're struggling just cash flow. Nobody's buying the vehicles. There are even people that are trying to buy the vehicles, they can't buy them just because of how bad the service is. So this is going to be extremely, extremely bad, because this is going to eat up now a lot of costs from the other divisions and their global divisions. And obviously, globally as well, this is not a good look for Fisker. This is not going to paint a good picture, because this is going to affect the global markets. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday. This is really going to affect those global markets. Potential buyers are going to see this and they're going to be like, oh, well, the global, market of Fisker, the global divisions, European divisions, they might have to pick up some slack, and, they might have to shift their focus away from their normal consumers. So this is, like I said, this is not a good look for Fisker overall. And this isn't a good thing at overall for them. But you ask anyone, this was going to happen. And like I said, I hate to bring up the whole, twice as market to fast thing, but it's, they talk about that here. There's no talk about their history or the heritage or what they've done, how they've innovated, because their history and all that hasn't turned out well. Like I said, with the Karma, it's not something that Fisker wants to remember. And the biggest thing here that Fisker has is, they talk about it, that's their first sentence, they brought the Ocean SUV to market twice as fast than expected. And they claim that they're making good on their promises to deliver the most sustainable vehicle in the world, but that has, they weren't ready. They were not set up. And like I said, when you look at the reviews of these vehicles, but when you look at the reviews of people just trying to buy a Fisker, it is clear this company was going to be doomed from the start, because there's no communication between corporate, between salespeople. This was just not going to work. And this really, really sucks because, you know, as of, earlier in this week and earlier last month, Fisker raised an additional capital from existing investors and it went up. It was at 3.456 million to a potential 7.5 million increase. So that's quite a lot. In the market of for a car manufacturer, it's not really that much. In fact, it's actually nothing. But when you look at manufacturing and things like that. But I mean, it was really interesting because as of May 13th, I mean, they had more money coming in potentially from investors, and so despite the position that Fisker was in, people were still willing to invest. People saw this brand as a viable brand in the future. And it sucks because that was promising. And for Fisker, like I said, that's not a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of it for a car manufacturer, but for Fisker, that's huge. And ultimately, when we see the software recall now, we see them file for Chapter 11, we have to wonder, is this it? Because clearly people still kept thinking, and Fisker could do something great, and they could be something great, even on a financial level. But now with all this news, we have to wonder, was this it? Is this the final blow? Is this the thing that those potential investors that were still increasing their investment or wanting to invest in Fisker, thinking at some point they could pay it off, knowing the history of Fisker, knowing them trying to go mainstream this time and just everything going wrong, from manufacturing to quality to corporate to sales, dealer network, is this going to be the final blow? Is this the image that when people think of Fisker, they'll be like, nope, I remember they tried to do that, and we won't invest in them again because they've tried to do it before and they can't do it? Is this that image? And that's ultimately going to be for investors to decide. I'm not going to put my sense in there because I'm not an investor or anything. For me, this doesn't really matter. Obviously, though, I think we can all make our own conclusions here. But for me, there's nothing really for me to say on that issue. That is going to do it for now, though. I just wanted to kind of go into a little bit more of a deep dive. We went pretty deep yesterday, but I just wanted to go a little bit more into a deep dive and just kind of have a conversation about this. Especially just because, too, the way the EV market is. This is not what you want to see. Especially, too, for a startup that was trying to make an affordable vehicle, this really puts a bad taste in the automotive market. It's really going to give a lot of people, even who weren't looking at Fisker, it's going to give them that image like saying, oh, wow, hey, Fisker tried to make an affordable EV, and guess what happened? It didn't work. So this has implications for numerous reasons, not only for Fisker, but just for the automotive market in general and the stigmas that certain types of vehicles get. That's going to do it for now, though, everyone. Please, 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 as I always say in these videos, let me know what you think down below. Did any of this resonate with you? Did you try at all to purchase a Fisker? Were you not able to purchase one? If you do have one or did have one, please let me know what your experience was. Even if it wasn't an EV, even if you were one of like the few people out there in the world that had a Karma, please let me know what you think down below. That is going to do it for now, though. Like always, thanks for watching, everyone.